She's the one who shot her.
She's the one who shot her.
Restraining order, but she shot her.
The gun in the car. The gun in the car.
Oh my fucking God!
Welcome to Crime Scene Chronicles, where we just don't follow the crime. We explore the mind behind it. Subscribe and stay with us, because some truths are hidden deeper than you think. There is a specific kind of silence that falls over a courtroom right before a bond hearing begins. It is not peaceful. It is not calm. It is the silence of a room full of people holding their breath, because everyone inside it knows that whatever happens in the next few minutes is going to detonate the moment it steps outside those doors. That is the silence that filled the Layton Criminal Courthouse today. And by the end of the afternoon, that silence had turned into something else entirely. Shouting, handcuffs, bodies pulled apart by sheriff's deputies, a pregnant woman still sitting behind glass, and a family that has already buried someone they loved, forced to relive the worst day of their lives in a hallway, in front of cameras, in front of strangers who have turned their grief into a spectator sport. This is the case of Romeca Meeks. If you have been following this channel, you already know her name. You know it because for months now, people online have been demanding one word over and over again. Justice. Justice for Mika.
I just want justice. I don't want to fight with nobody. I don't want to argue with nobody. I just want justice for my daughter. And I want peace in my family.
That is what her supporters call her. Mika, the nickname of a woman whose life ended in a way that has never been fully explained to the public. Only hinted at through an aftermath video that most people have seen, but very few people actually understand. And on the other side of this case sits a woman named Quadasia Johnson, sometimes called Holly, sometimes called Quanacia, sometimes called Quadasia, depending on who is talking about her online, which should tell you something on its own about how tangled this story has already become before we even get to what happened today. Here is what we know for certain, and only what we know for certain, because I am not going to stand here and hand you a rumor dressed up as a fact. Quadasia Johnson's attorneys stood before the judge today and asked for her release. That is their job. That is the system working exactly the way it is designed to work, whether or not it feels satisfying to watch. Her lawyers argued that she is pregnant. They argued that before this case she had almost nothing on her record. One misdemeanor, nothing violent, nothing that would suggest a pattern. They argued that she held a valid concealed carry permit, that she had never been known to pull that weapon on another person before, and that nothing in her history marked her as dangerous. They argued, in the coldest legal language possible, that their client is not a flight risk. That is what an attorney is supposed to say. That is not an opinion about guilt or innocence. That is a legal argument, and it is always going to sound uncomfortable when the person on the other side of the case is dead and can never speak for herself again. I know that argument is difficult to sit with when you already believe you know how this story ends. I know it feels almost offensive to hear a defense attorney stand up and talk about pregnancy and clean records in the same breath as a woman's death. But this is the exact moment where I think it matters most to separate the emotional response from the mechanical reality of how a courtroom actually functions. A bond hearing is not a trial. It is not a verdict. It is a legal question about risk, about whether a person is likely to flee or likely to endanger the community while their case is pending. It says nothing in either direction about guilt or innocence. An attorney arguing for release is not arguing that the loss of Romeca Meeks does not matter. They are doing the one job the law assigns them, which is to make sure that even the most despised defendant in the building gets the same procedural rights as anyone else, because the moment that principle breaks down for one person, it is no longer reliable for anybody. The judge said no. For the second time now, Quadasia Johnson will not be walking out of that building. She will sit and wait, and she will be back in that same courtroom on January the 7th, when this entire process starts over again. That is the part of the story that would normally end the segment. A hearing happened. A decision was made. Mark your calendar for the next date. But today, the hearing was not the story. What happened after the hearing is the story. According to our field producer, who was physically standing in that courthouse, Quadasia Johnson's family was released from the courtroom first. They lingered briefly in the hallway. Then Romeca's family was let out behind them. And here is where things start to blur, because there were still supporters of Quadasia Johnson lingering in that same hallway when Romeca's family walked out. Words were exchanged. I want to be very careful here, because I was not standing in that hallway, and neither was anyone on my team close enough to say definitively who said the first word that lit the match. What I can tell you is that there are realistically three groups of people invested in this case. There are the people who have stood behind Romeca since the day she died, who have organized, who have posted, who have shown up outside that courthouse every single time there has been a hearing. There are the people who believe Quadasia Johnson is innocent, who believe she acted the way anyone in fear for their life might act, who believe she is being railroaded by a public that has already decided her guilt before a single piece of evidence has been tested in open court. And then there is a third group, and honestly, this might be the largest group of all. People who know neither woman personally. People who have simply been swept up in the algorithm of this story, sharing videos, sharing theories, sharing outrage, without ever once considering that there are real human beings on both sides of this who have to walk back into that courthouse every single month and face each other. Try to hold both of those groups in your mind at the same time for a second, because that is exactly what that hallway was forced to hold today, with no buffer, no separation, no cooling off period. Two sets of supporters, each one convinced of a completely different version of justice, standing shoulder to shoulder in a space never designed to contain that much grief and that much suspicion at once. Outside the courthouse, a woman named T.T. Barfield captured video that has already begun spreading across social media. In it, you can hear Romeca's sister directing raw, unfiltered pain at a man identified as Carlos, her voice cracking as she tells him that he ruined that girl's life, that his actions cost her sister forever. Whether Carlos said something first, whether he approached the family or whether the family approached him, is something that depends entirely on who you ask. Some witnesses say Carlos walked toward Romeca's family, and that is what set everything off. Other witnesses insist it was the opposite, that Romeca's family confronted him the moment they saw his face. What we do have on video is both sides shouting over each other in that hallway, voices tangled together so tightly that you cannot cleanly separate who threw the first word like a weapon. What happened next did not stay verbal. Carlos was placed in handcuffs and escorted back into the courthouse. Alongside him, a member of Romeca's family, identifiable by the pink she was wearing, the same pink that has become something of a quiet uniform among Romeca's supporters at every hearing since this began, was also handcuffed and brought back inside. A third individual was involved as well, though their identity remains unclear from the footage circulating so far. By the end of it, 3 people had been detained as a direct result of what unfolded outside that courthouse. Whether all 3 will actually face formal charges is still an open question, and it is one I am not going to guess at, because guessing is exactly the kind of behavior that has made this entire case so much messier than it needed to be. There is something else circulating around this case that I think deserves to be said out loud, because it has quietly shaped a lot of the anger you are seeing online, without most people realizing it. Some of the most aggressive, most inflammatory takes about this case are not coming from open public conversation. They are coming out of private, invite-only groups, small, closed corners of social media where only a handful of people are let in, and where a very specific version of events gets repeated over and over until it starts to feel like established fact to the people inside it. That is how misinformation calcifies, not through one big lie, but through 100 small ones, repeated in a room where nobody is allowed to push back. And then those same claims spill out into public comment sections looking like consensus, when really they were manufactured in an echo chamber that most of us never see. I am not telling you this to dismiss anyone's pain, I am telling you this because I want you, as someone who cares enough about this case to be watching a video like this one, to be a little more skeptical the next time a screenshot with no source shows up in your feed claiming to know exactly what happened. I have reached out to the Cook County Sheriff's Department, and I am waiting on their official account of what happened in that hallway and on those courthouse steps. Several deputies present during the altercation were wearing body cameras, which means there should eventually be footage that settles, or at least clarifies, who did what and in what order. Until that account comes back, I am not going to stand here and hand you somebody's Facebook version of events, dressed up as confirmed reporting. And I want to be honest with you, because you deserve honesty even when it is uncomfortable. There have absolutely been moments in this country's history where law enforcement's official version of events did not match reality, particularly in cases involving use of force. I am not naive to that. But right now, an official account from a department with body camera footage is still the most reliable thing available to us. And that is the thread I am going to follow until something proves otherwise. It is worth pausing here, before we go any further, to remember who Romeca Meeks actually was before any of this happened. Because it is far too easy in a case like this for a person to get flattened into a single video clip and a hashtag. She was somebody's sister. She was somebody's daughter. Before the aftermath video, before the courthouse hallway, before any of the noise that now surrounds her name online, she was simply a woman living her life. The kind of ordinary life that never once looks like it is about to become a headline. That is what makes cases like this so disorienting for the families left behind. One day, you are planning an ordinary Tuesday together, and the next day, strangers on the internet are debating the worst moment of your family's life, like it is a plot twist in a show they are binge-watching. Romeca's family has had to carry that weight through every single one of these hearings, sitting a few feet away from people who, at times, do not even bother lowering their voices out of respect for the fact that a grieving family is sitting right there in the same room. Here is the part of this story that I think gets lost every single time a case becomes this emotionally loud. A judge's primary responsibility inside that courtroom is not simply deciding guilt or setting bond. It is safety. It is making absolutely certain that whatever chaos is bubbling up outside those doors does not spill back inside and put jurors, attorneys, family members, or courtroom staff at risk. I have watched cases like this before. Cases where public emotion runs so hot that a judge eventually has no choice but to restrict who is even allowed inside the room. It has happened. A judge can decide that only immediate family of both the victim and the defendant, along with credentialed media, will be permitted inside, and that everyone else will have to watch from a live stream or a separate overflow room. If today's altercation is any indication of where this is heading, do not be shocked if the courtroom on January 7th looks very different, with far more security, far fewer bodies allowed inside, and a judge who has run out of patience for hallway confrontations bleeding into the legal process. I understand the anger. I want to say that clearly, because I think sometimes when reporters try to be measured, viewers hear that as cold, and that is not what this is. There is a young woman who is gone. There is a family that will spend every single holiday for the rest of their lives with an empty chair at the table. There is absolutely a right to be angry about that, a right to demand answers, a right to show up outside that courthouse and make your voice heard. I am not asking anyone to stop feeling. What I am asking, and what I think this entire case desperately needs right now, is for people to stop turning their grief into threats against strangers on the internet who have nothing to do with the actual charges in this case. Because that is happening. I have personally received messages from people I have never met, people investigating me for nothing more than reporting facts as they come in, some of them now being looked into by outside agencies because of the things they have said. And it is not just directed at reporters. I have watched people online direct outright hatred at Romeca's own family members, people like Tina McMillan, accusing her of somehow being responsible for the pace of these charges, when the truth is she has no power over that whatsoever. She was not a witness to what happened. She cannot file charges. She cannot speed up a prosecutor's timeline. Charges in a case like this move through police investigators to the Cook County State's Attorney's Office, and in certain cases, potentially to a grand jury. An ordinary person watching from the outside, no matter how closely connected they are to the victim, has zero ability to control any of that. And yet the anger keeps landing on her anyway, because outrage online rarely bothers to check whether it is aimed at the right target before it fires. I will tell you something I do not say very often on this channel, because it is not something I like to lead with. I have lost someone to violence myself. Someone I loved was murdered when I was still young. Young enough that the grief did not have anywhere mature to go, so it just sat inside me, loud and shapeless, for a very long time. The person responsible for that loss is serving the rest of their life in prison. I remember what it felt like to want the world to feel exactly as much rage as I did, to want someone, anyone, to pay immediately, publicly, and completely, before the legal system had even finished doing its work. I understand that impulse in a way that goes beyond professional distance. And it is exactly because I understand it that I am telling you this. That anger, if you let it consume the process itself instead of the person responsible, does not bring anyone back. It does not restore what was taken. It just spreads, hallway to hallway, comment section to comment section, until everybody is bruised and nobody actually got justice out of it. I also want to sit for a moment on what it must have felt like inside that hallway before any of this turned physical, because I think we skip past that too quickly when we are just chasing the headline of who got handcuffed. Picture it. Two families who will never fully be free of each other, walking out of the same set of doors on the same afternoon into the same narrow hallway, each one carrying a version of the truth they believe with their whole chest. Nobody in that hallway woke up that morning planning to end up on the ground, or in handcuffs, or trending on social media by dinner time. They woke up planning to go to a bond hearing, the same as they had before, and to go home afterward, the same as they had before. That is how quickly grief curdles into confrontation when there is no outlet for it, when a courthouse hallway becomes the only shared space two grieving, furious sides of the same tragedy have left to occupy. So where does this leave us? Quadazia Johnson remains in custody. She will appear again on January 7th, still pregnant, still facing a case that has already reshaped two families beyond recognition. Romeca Meeks is still gone, and no hearing, no verdict, no headline is ever going to change that fact. 3 people walked out of a courthouse today carrying grief in one hand and handcuffs in the other. And depending on what the Cook County Sheriff's Department reports back, we may finally get a clearer picture of exactly how a bond hearing turned into an arrest scene within the same afternoon. I will have a full report on this at 4 and 5 o'clock, once I hear back with the official account. Until then, I want to leave you with this. Somewhere behind every headline in this case is a woman who is never coming home, and a woman sitting in a cell who has not yet had her story fully told in a courtroom. Both of those things can be true at the exact same time. Holding space for that complexity, instead of collapsing it into a hashtag, is the only way any of us actually get closer to the truth here, instead of just getting louder. If this case has had you gripped the way it has had me gripped, make sure you like this video and subscribe to Crime Scene Chronicles, because the moment the Cook County Sheriff's Department gets back to me with their account of what happened in that hallway, and the moment new details drop before January 7th, you are going to want to already be subscribed so you do not miss it. This story is not over, not even close, and I will be right here following it, the same way I always do, until the truth actually makes it into that courtroom instead of just circulating around it. There is one more thing I keep coming back to, sitting with this story tonight, and it is this. Every single person involved in this case, on every single side of it, is going to wake up tomorrow and have to keep living inside it. Quadazia Johnson is going to wake up in a cell, pregnant, waiting for a date on a calendar that keeps getting pushed further away from her. Romeca's family is going to wake up and still have to explain to the youngest members of their household why she is not coming to the next birthday, the next holiday, the next ordinary Tuesday. And somewhere in the middle of all of it, a judge is going to have to keep making decisions that will never fully satisfy either side, because that is what the job actually is. It was never going to make everybody happy. It was only ever going to try to be fair. I think that is the piece so many of us forget when we watch a case like this unfold from behind a phone screen. We want it to resolve like a story does, with a clean ending, a villain punished, a family healed, a hashtag retired. Real grief does not work that way. Real justice, when it actually functions the way it is supposed to, is slow, procedural, and often deeply unsatisfying in the moment, even when it eventually gets somewhere true. That does not mean the system is beyond criticism. It absolutely is not, and I will keep holding it accountable every time I sit down in front of this camera. But it does mean that the fastest, loudest, angriest version of events circulating online is rarely the most accurate one, and it is almost never the one that actually helps the people at the center of this story heal. So I will keep doing what I have always done on this channel. I will wait for the sheriff's department. I will wait for the body camera footage. I will wait for January 7th. And I will bring you every piece of it as it actually happens, without dressing it up and without tearing it down before it has even had the chance to be tested in that courtroom. That is the promise of this channel, and it is one I intend to keep, hearing after hearing, until Romeca Meeks finally gets the full, complete truth that she deserves, and until we know, definitively, exactly what happened to her. There is a reason I keep coming back to cases like this one, instead of just moving on to whatever story is trending tomorrow. It is because I think somebody has to sit in the uncomfortable middle of stories like this, refusing to pick a side, just because picking a side gets more engagement, refusing to declare a winner before a jury or a judge actually has, and refusing to let either family become a caricature of themselves for the sake of a viral clip. Romeca Meeks deserves better than to become a hashtag that fades the moment the next case starts trending. Quadazia Johnson deserves a process that is not decided by a comments section before it is decided by a courtroom. And every single person who was in that hallway today, on every side of this, deserves the chance to grieve, to be angry, to be scared, without turning each other into targets. Thank you for watching. If you have not already, like and subscribe to Crime Scene Chronicles. Turn on notifications so you catch the update the moment the Sheriff's Department responds. And I will see you in the next one.